This is a continuation of Chapter 3, Key Issue 2, Where Are Migrants Distributed? Students will be able to explain the impact U.S. immigration patterns have had on the United States. Concepts to know would be undocumented immigrants, coyote, and chain migration. So the focus of this section is to look at the impact of immigration on the United States. The first section was legacy of European migration on the United States. So Europeans came during the first era, in the colonial era, in the 1800s, in 1700s, 1800s, and then there was the second wave of European migration during the 1900s, or 20th century, with the different peaks based on the Industrial Revolution. And so what legacy did European migration have on the United States? Well, we already talked about how the Industrial Revolution that happened in Europe, starting in the Northwest in Great Britain and then spreading south and east, that the Industrial Revolution caused these countries to go into a stage 2 demographically. So we saw a rapid natural increase rate, and this fueled migration from Europe to the United States. England needed to grow more food for their growing population, so the government consolidated small family farms into large farms to feed this growing population. This was called the enclosure movement. As families had lots of kids, and as their kids grew up and were family farm land was passed on down to these children, the family farms got smaller and smaller and smaller, and the efficiency of growing food wasn't very efficient, especially thinking during the Industrial Revolution, where technology like farm equipment was made, and they were able to efficiently farm with large farms using this technology. So with a growing population, there needed to be more efficient farming methods, and so the government consolidated these small family farms and made them into large farms. Well, this enclosure movement had a devastating effect on the people who lived on these farms. It forced them to leave their farms, and many of them moved to the cities where they worked in factories, but they also moved to the United States. So this is basically representing Zelensky's migration transition stages. In a stage 2, demographic transition, people will move internationally. They will leave their country because it's so crowded, or they will move internally to a different region, from rural farms to urban cities where they work in factories. And this is exactly what happened in Europe. So they're forced off their farms, moved to the cities, but many of them went to the United States, and the United States became England's, in a sense, safety valve, meaning that migrants from England, they were so crowded, needed a place to go because their country was so crowded. The U.S. was close. It's a great place to go. There were already people from their same culture there, chain migration, and very similar environment, so it was a great place to go. Australia was also a safety valve for England, but not quite as close as the United States. So what kind of legacy did European migration have on the United States? Well, the emigration, the leaving of Europeans, had a positive effect. It spread their culture, where they migrated to, their language, their religion, which is Christianity, art, music, literature, values, etc. So Europeans spread their culture to the places where they moved to. For example, the United States and Australia, which are very similar culturally to Europeans. Emigration of Europeans has negatively affected the regions that they migrated to, where they colonized, causing a lot of conflict between the local peoples there, living in the places they colonized, and conflict between the colonial powers, those European colonial powers, British, French, Spanish, Portuguese, the conflict between these colonial powers and the local peoples that they colonized. Those in Africa, India, parts of Latin America, and so forth. So Europeans took political control of areas in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. They took their valuable resources back to their countries. Spaniards were looking for gold in the Americas. Europeans were looking for all sorts of resources in Africa, including slaves. They also enslaved the people to work on their plantations. African slaves were transported to Caribbean islands to work on sugar plantations, transported to Brazil, transported to the United States to work for them for free. Also, Europeans redrew boundary lines, causing a lot of conflict among the local people in those areas. Europeans drew new boundary lines on the continent of Africa in the late 1880s, having many different ethnic groups be within one boundary line. That caused a lot of conflict between the different ethnic groups within those new boundary lines that Europeans drew. So diffusion of European culture, definitely positive in some place, but then European colonial dominance over places also caused a lot of conflict between the peoples that live there and between colonial powers and the local people. What about undocumented immigration in the United States? So many people, especially from Latin America, have come, especially Mexico, have come to the United States looking for work. And many of them are undocumented or illegal. Half came from Mexico, half are adult males, and then the other half women and children. So as I said, most come looking for work, but they don't have permission from the government to enter the United States. Most of the work that is done by illegal immigrants is agriculture and farming. They're picking crops, cleaning, like in hotels, construction work, and food preparation and food processing plants, meat packing plants, and so forth. Half come as students or tourists legally in the first place, and then they just continue to stay without permission. The other half just slip across the border without permission. So in the United States, between the United States and Mexico, there is the border along the Rio Grande, and there is a fence across part of this border. And crossing this U.S.-Mexican border really isn't too difficult. It's not a continuous fence, and it's not completely guarded, mostly guarded near the large urban areas. But there's large sections of this border that are not guarded. Coyotes, who are people who smuggle immigrants across the border, charge money to transport immigrants, and charge lots of money, especially when it's very risky, which it has become since 9/11. But even after immigrants get caught and deported back to their home country, they usually try again to cross the border, often within days or within a few months. So this doesn't deter them because of they have family members, they have jobs in the United States, and so they need to get back there. In 1986, there was an Immigration Reform Act, which was mentioned in the last section. It tried to reduce the number of illegal immigrants by allowing all the immigrants who had been living in the country continuously from 1982 to 1997, whether they were undocumented or not, allow them to apply for citizenship. At first, many undocumented immigrants feared that they would be deported, so they didn't apply. But eventually, many did apply, and a lot of people were accepted as citizens. It has made it harder for illegal immigrants to find work because they do need the proper documentation that shows that they are in the United States legally. It is illegal for a U.S. company if they knowingly hire illegal immigrants. Although this doesn't stop companies from doing this, but it is illegal. So, destination of immigrants within the United States. So half of all immigrants in the United States live in California, New York, Florida, and Texas. Mexicans often go to California and Texas, but also Illinois, to work in the food processing factories. Caribbean islanders go to New York and to Florida, close by, and Asians go mostly to New York and California. Where they go is influenced by the gravity model, that they usually go closer, so that would explain Mexicans going to California or Texas, or Caribbean islanders going to Florida, Asians going to California. Gravity model not only is going to a place that's closer, but also going to a large urban center of economic activity. So that would explain why people go to New York City, and to larger cities in California or Florida. But where they go is also influenced by chain migration. Chain migration is where people migrate to the same area where their ethnic group or where their community of people is. So largely in a place like San Francisco, where there's a Chinatown, many people from China have moved to San Francisco, Chinatown, because many people already live there. So you feel comfortable with your same culture, same language, same food. And so you see a lot of chain migration, that people go to areas where there's already their same ethnic group. Another, just looking at the impact of migration on the United States, it has changed the population pyramid. If most of the people who are migrating are males in their working age group, you would see, or even in this case females, you can see that the majority of migrants are in this working age area. Now, definitely some come with their families, and some are older and they've been living here in the United States for a while, and so they're older. But this is in relationship to what the native population looks like, which looks like more like a stage, kind of going into a stage 4, stage 3 population pyramid, and this definitely is going to influence the demographic transition that our country is in, with this large working group. This would make this area kind of go out a little bit bigger, and so look maybe more like a stage 3. So foreign-born definitely affects the population pyramid in the United States, make it much broader and the working population.